Hi. In this, I wanted to share a bit of advice to younger candidates who may not be familiar with some time-hardened interviewing advice when it comes to passing job interviews with high-performing companies in particular. Okay, and I must be upfront with you. Some of this advice can be considered as a bit direct to some of you. Okay, the first thing I'd like to talk about here is that in job interviews, the problem isn't that you look dumb, but the problem is when you say something dumb. Okay, so long story short, your focus, the idea I'm trying to communicate here is that too many of you focus on cosmetics while going into job interviews, such as having the best possible lighting in your videos, having a high definition camera, or revising your CVs for the actual interview, when in fact what happens during these job interviews, it's a conversation with some very smart people. And having a conversation with some really smart people requires your full attention, requires your critical thinking. And you'll be surprised how many people cannot avoid being distracted by other stuff, even by their cheat sheets if you want, in a job interview, and unfortunately bomb their interviews for this reason. Okay, so the fix here is critical thinking and avoid cosmetics. These are big ones in job interviews. Okay, the second thing I like to talk about here is stop jumping on trends. Okay, so except for the remote interviewing trend, which picked up steam during the pandemic, not much has changed in job interviews for the past 15 years. The dynamic is largely the same. Okay, now there's been quite a few trends since, and I can tell you from experience of someone being involved in this business for the past 15 years, is that most of the time these trends are commercial initiatives to hook you up or to hook people up on to bring adoption of some general purpose innovation, such as artificial intelligence. Okay, now what I would advise you instead of jumping in trends, is something that correlates hundreds times better than jumping on trends. That is to prefer old-fashioned. If you want a comparison, the pen and paper approach to prepare job interviews versus the digital approach. Okay, and the reason why I'm so confident this correlates hundreds of times better is because if you jump on trends, you're more likely to get disqualified from your interview even before it begins. Okay, the most classic example being if you start rewarding your answers using AI. Okay, you're a completely wrong track to pass these job interviews when compared to someone who doesn't even consider going at that way, preparing on using pen and paper. Okay, I helped thousands of you to pass these interviews, and I see, some clear differences of perspectives between you. So that's why I'm sharing this type of advice. Point number 3 I want to talk about here will be dealing with rejection. Okay, so rejection can be quite uncomfortable for these job interviews, but if you think in statistics, it's the most likely outcome. Okay, so if it's the most likely outcome, statistically speaking, then why not prepare to fail it well? Okay, so what would motivate you to fail that interview without regrets? Okay, some people go even as far as to try to postpone their job interviews because they're not fully prepared for the occasion. Okay, but if you look at the average tenure in a FANG company, it's less than 5 years, which basically means in 5 years you'll have to interview again. Okay, so this means that in preparing yourself to interview better can be quite a profitable investment for you. Okay, so interviewing, and since interviewing can be quite taxing on you, why put all your eggs into one basket, that is one job interview, when you could also, if you make this choice to invest in this interview prep, you could also line up multiple interviews with multiple companies. because you've probably been asked throughout the process if you're interviewing with other companies at the same time. And the reason this interview question is so common is because most high-performing candidates interview with multiple companies at the same time, and sometimes even line multiple offers. Okay, it's not as exceptional as some of you might consider, even in today's job market. But my advice to you as for dealing with rejection would be to focus on failing your interview well. Okay, if you cannot fail your interview well, I don't know, postpone it, cancel it altogether. But the best outcomes, the best learnings you'll get is if you fail them well, right? Point number 4 here, a quick one. Pulling an all-nighter still works, and I'm addressing a younger audience here. If, of course, this is the night, if it's not the night before your interview, okay. But still, I see many of you doing all-nighters. For example, using my training programs, and also on the same reasoning, pulling an all-nighter as a motivational boost if you want. You could also parallel your interview prep with other friends, because this could also greatly help you with engagement in the process. I'm not going to say interview prep is comfortable, but you could make it more comfortable if you do it together with some friends. Okay. And finally, point number 5, last but not least, is about bluffing. Bluffing in job interviews has always been a very fascinating trend. I know it attracts a good audience. Rewarding your answers using AI can be quite tempting, but I wanted to bring you a little bit of a different perspective with respect to bluffing. That is, bluffing almost never worked with FAANG and with high-performing companies in particular, simply because these are rich companies who can afford throwing a lot of resources into the interview process. For example, I recently had a candidate who went through 11 rounds interviewing with NVIDIA. Now, you tell me the probability that you can bluff your way out through 11 rounds of these interviews. What happens in reality is that most of the time, the way you'll bluff will be interpreted by the interviewer. Yeah, okay, they're trying, but they're not succeeding, but I do get your point. Now, a much more disadvantageous position is if you bluff on something and you drive the conversation in the totally opposite direction you intended to. For example, if you're applying for a senior technical PM and your opening pitch is, I led a $300 million bid to develop an AI agent for a large bank, chances are the interviewer will become interested. Hey, how did you lead that actual bid? You going for a technical PM role. Because, the candidate would reward their answer using AI to sound more compelling as an introductory pitch, when in fact that candidate was, maybe in that team somewhere, but nowhere near the decision factors who led that actual bid. They were actually more involved in the technical aspect of the development of the AI app. Okay, so this would be an example of where bluffing in job interviews can seriously backfire and not play to your advantage. Bluffing is natural to most people, so it's, if you prepare your interview well, if you prepare to speak clearly during your job interview, you'll almost inevitably at some points, try to try to sell yourself a bit better. This is natural in job interviews. This is nothing new, but changing the way you talk, changing the dynamic of your experiences for the simple purpose that you think they might sound better, this is not something that I would recommend. Okay, so I hope you found this advice useful, and thank you very much for watching.